Hi folks, you're with Tacitus today at your Pushback channel, and thank you for joining us. In this essay I'd like to talk about how I'd like to compare two things, compare the level of expertise and qualifications and training that a straight white male senior engineering executive has compared to an affirmative action hire in the same position. So say for example, senior engineer in charge of building a bridge or something like that. Just looking at the two there, in comparison, the straight white male, their qualifications, and then the affirmative action hire, which can be any minority, brown, black, anything, and looking at the difference. And the difference is huge. It's a chasm, for goodness sakes. Then the second part of this essay is to compare the adverts that are placed on the job boards for the same sort of position, for example, or any role actually, but I'm looking at the moment at senior engineers and deputy vice president engineering, that sort of level of a role, but it could be anything. It could be director of procurement or something like that. And then looking at the advert and the stated mandatory criteria for the advert on the job board, and then looking at who is actually hired for that role and seeing if their actual qualifications and credentials and experience come anywhere near to matching the criteria that was mentioned in the advert on the job board. So those are the two parts of this essay. So just looking at the adverts, now running through a number of adverts on job boards, they state, must have a degree in such and such, must have a master's, a PhD will be highly desirable, must have 10 plus years experience at this particular product or marketplace or projects or whatever the case may be, but a listed minimum requirement for the experience they have on the ground and in the area that they have gained that experience. So this is fair enough. I mean, the adverts are on the job boards in the public domain. Everyone can see it. Those who think they meet or exceed that criteria can apply, and those who think they don't meet the criteria or come nowhere close probably wouldn't apply in the overall scheme of things. So keeping those adverts and keeping them sort of a record of them, then we can go to pretty much any business website and look at actually who ended up getting that job. So it's easy to compare the CV they have online to the criteria mentioned in the advert. Now, with the CV that people tend to put on their business profiles and the like, they certainly gild the lily. They're trying very hard to make themselves look probably quite a bit better than they are, and so you're looking at the best representation of their credentials that you could possibly imagine, and so those are the ones. The reality is probably quite a bit different, but looking at that representation online compared to the criteria listed in the job advert, now it'll be no surprise to you that in the case of minorities being hired into these roles, it'll be no surprise that they fall not just a little bit short, but mostly very well short of the listed criteria in the advert. And in quite a few cases, more than you'd imagine, they meet almost none of the criteria listed or fall so far short of it that they shouldn't even be considered as a they shouldn't even send their CV in to be considered. But this doesn't seem to prevent them getting hired. So you're looking at 10, 15 years minimum experience, and then the person they hire has maybe 2 years experience and not even in a directly related field, in an indirectly related field. They got their degree at some third world university where it's universally recognised. You gain the degree through bribery and so on. And universities in third world countries aren't necessarily there for education purposes. It's a place where the rich elite, the boys and the girls meet, they party, they pair off. It's where girls go to find a husband and this sort of thing. So it's got nothing to do with education. It's just an elite social scene with the pretense of an education. And if you're particularly stupid or can't be bothered doing any work or any study, then you just bribe the lecturers. And that's how things are done in these third world countries. They don't think anything about it. and in one third world country where they hired a dean from I think he was English, but hired a dean some years ago who said that the examinations were going to be the final word on whether or not she got the degree. There was a riot, and some of the lecturers were even killed in the riot. So that shows how they view education. It's something that you just bribe the teachers or the lecturers to get a better mark. By the way, these third world people coming to the first world, it's quite standard practice for Chinese parents and Indian parents in Australia to go around trying to bribe their teachers to get the kids a better mark. So they've brought their corrupt practices to the West, and I'm sure some of them are being converted to Western practices, but just as many think it's like it was in the old country. If you want something, you just bribe somebody. What's the use of doing the hard work? So anyway, we've got the odd situation here where people who come nowhere close to meeting the criteria, this is black, brown people, minorities, who come nowhere close to meeting the criteria as listed in the job advert, they somehow are getting brought in for an interview. Now, why would you interview somebody? How would these people even get into why would they even send in a CV if they're so far short of the mark? Unless they were pretty confident there would be affirmative action hiring practices. It's almost like they've got the inside knowledge or running about which companies are doing affirmative action and which jobs are going to be assigned to a minority hiring. So that seems a bit strange. So people, again, who meet nothing, not even close, nowhere near the criteria as listed that a straight white male would have to meet. These people who don't meet the criteria, don't come even close, they get somehow brought in for an interview. Not only that, they get the job even though they meet none of the criteria. So either the criteria itself is just some fantasy wish list that no one even thinks is going to be anywhere near met, or alternatively it's something that only applies to straight white males, and brown, black people are held to minorities are held to a much lower standard, and maybe that's probably closer to the mark. I mean, similarly there are race and gender quotas, that sort of thing, and I'm sure that some jobs will be allocated to those. Maybe at the last minute, maybe as they're sitting down to think, okay, what who will we interview for this job? They're looking at it and going, well, hey, we need another brown person here, or we need another black lesbian there, or something like that, in order to meet the race gender quotas. There's probably even now a transgender quota somewhere. So, and then this is the type, the HR, the people in human resources that get hired, they're very much the gender studies types who really buy into all this bullshit. So they're probably quite eager participants in all this crap, this social engineering. So that seems to be what's happening. That people who, and it's more than you think. Whenever I see a black and brown person getting, they see their resume, and then you look at the job they were hired into. In pretty much every case, with maybe the odd exception, they're getting hired into jobs where they don't even come close to meeting the minimum mandatory criteria. So you've got to ask, why are they getting hired? If it's not race and gender quotas, why would any business do that? And why would you knowingly, willingly go out of your way to hire someone who is completely unqualified? The other side of it is, how would these people even know to send in their CV when they're a million miles away from the qualification that is being sought? They'd have to have some inside knowledge, otherwise they wouldn't bother. Maybe it's wishful thinking. Maybe they send off CVs for just everything, hoping, like the scattergun effect, hoping that something's gonna hit sooner or later. Maybe it's that. But given how soon they arrive in the first world, from the moment they arrive in the first world to how quickly they get a job, then you'd have to say it's more than a scattergun. There seems to be something else going on there. So that's it. The other thing is, when we look at, and say looking at senior engineer in charge of building the bridge type role, this is a pretty senior role. You're looking at engineering director, maybe a junior VP of engineering, even a senior VP of engineering, but you're looking at a pretty senior level, and rightfully so. I'm building a big bridge or a big public works or any major engineering project. You need qualified people, for goodness sakes. But if you compare the amount of when you compare the straight white male and their qualifications when they hold or get elevated to or promoted to or hired into this sort of senior role, and then you compare black and brown people, minorities, at that same level of managerial, that same managerial level in the company. You compare the two, and I've got two in front of me here just to give you an illustration. Now, the straight white male, he's got a degree in one of the top tier universities in the West, and he also got a master's. So he's got a master in engineering. Then he's got, looks like he's got an internship, traineeship thing here for a couple of years. Then he's got 15 years experience in the field, 3.5, 4 years at handling quite big projects. So he's got 15 years practical engineering experience in the field on frontline projects, plus these qualifications. So he's a pretty experienced guy, and he's just been promoted to that level. And you can say with confidence he knows what he's doing. And I've interviewed engineering candidates for jobs, and the difference between the affirmative action hire and the straight white male, the difference is it's wider than the Grand Canyon. The straight white males, they know their stuff. The affirmative action people who've been waved through university, waved through high school, and just handed their degrees as a gift, they don't know squat. And their attitude is, I can look it up online. Why do I need to know anything? Which is hardly the right attitude, and hardly an attitude you need when you're building a bridge as a civil public works project. But anyway, then you look at, compared to the straight white male, a very qualified straight white male, you look at affirmative action hires that are in the same level of management. Now, the straight white male's got 15 years practical field experience. The average amount of field experience for the affirmative action hires, the black, brown, the females and so on, is about 4 years. So 15 years compared to 4 years. The degrees that the black and brown people have are typically from third world universities that you wouldn't treat as being in any way a serious education. Maybe they've had a minor bridging course at a very affirmative action Western college that, again, no one ever fails at, and so they're waved through. So the standard of their education is far, far below what the straight white male would have. And any experience, any sort of work experience they had previously, or maybe in the third world country, was typically in a family business where it's just graft and corruption decides everything. They haven't got to produce a result or do anything. Half the shit that they build falls over, within a year or two of it being put up, and a high school kid could do better than that. So this is the sort of standard of person coming in. Now, I don't know whether these people are getting to make the serious engineering decisions on the ground. I wouldn't give a serious engineering decision to them. If I did, I'd want a lot of straight white males checking it to make sure it was accurate. But nonetheless, so maybe these jobs are being created as just window dressing to make it look like they're diverse, and they've got to, maybe because they rely on so many government contracts, maybe the government's leaning on them to say that you have to have a very diverse workforce, the appearance of a diverse workforce. So maybe these people sit around shuffling paper all day but actually don't do anything. The real work's still done by the straight white males, and I'd suspect that's probably happening, certainly with the key decisions. Now, they must also be held to a much lower standard. They're much less experienced, they're much less qualified, they're got different attitudes to work and so on. So they're not the sort of people you want to put on the front line. So maybe they're just there again, as I said, for window dressing. But this will give you a sort of a wider picture that I can just randomly pick any black or brown person at a senior management level, unless they've been born in the West, and there's some difference there, and look at them, and I just know, without even going into the detail, that they'll be either totally unqualified or minimally qualified, and that they won't meet the minimum criteria as stated in the advert. So you've been with Tastus today, your Pushback channel, and thank you for listening.